This week I want to discuss rooms, and specifically unplaced rooms. So the most likely scenario where you run into unplaced rooms in a project situation is when you either deliberately or accidentally select a room and delete it from, say, a floor plan. Now, when you do that, a message will appear down here in the corner, which sometimes is easy to miss, so it might have just flashed by and then disappeared very quickly. But if you notice the message appear and you actually read through it, it says, a room was deleted from all the model views but still remains in the project. And it says the room can be removed from any schedule, or it can be placed back in the model using the room command. So there's sort of three key points that are happening right there, and I'd like to dig into each one of those. So the room still exists is the first point. The room can be deleted permanently from a schedule is the second point, and you can also place it back in the model is the third point. So let's start with the middle item, the fact that we can access this room from a schedule. And what I'm going to do is scroll down here, and the only room schedule that is in this file at the moment is this room finish schedule. Now it said any schedule, so this one will work, but it's not necessarily the best choice for this. But let me go ahead and open up that room finish schedule. And you're going to see that there are two entries here, room 100 and room 101. Now, what I'm going to do is take my room finish schedule here, and I'm going to drag it and tear it off of the application frame there. And then I'm going to come over here and make it occupy the half of the screen there so that you can see it side by side with the floor plan. And what you'll see is the corridor still displays here. And if I click on it, you're going to see that highlight there in the floor plan. Okay, so that room does still exist. But when I click on room 100, it does not highlight anywhere in the plan because we have removed it from all the model views. That was the first part of that message. Now, it still exists in the project. This is what Revit meant. So we can still see that Lobby 100 is a room here in our room finish schedule. Now, what we're not really seeing is any indication, if we were just looking at the schedule, of the difference between these two rooms, right? How would we know that one of them is appearing in the model and the other one is not unless we had our views tiled side by side like I've done here? So what I want to do is, instead of this room finish schedule, I'm going to create a new room schedule. So I'm going to go to the View tab here, click the Schedules and Quantities dropdown, and choose that first item there. Scroll down and locate the Rooms category. Select it. It's going to suggest the name Room Schedule, which is fine, but this is going to be a working schedule for me, so I'm going to put in the name Working in front of it, and then I will click OK. Now, I'll go ahead and add the same two properties that are existing in this room finish schedule in columns A and B, and that is the room number and the room name. So I will add number, and then I will add name. And then I'm also going to add the area. Now, when I click OK, that schedule will appear, and it will go right on top of the room finish schedule, which is fine. I actually don't need the room finish schedule anymore, so I'm just going to close that. And we are left with just this working room schedule instead. Now you can see a little bit more clearly the information that we want to see here, because the corridor, the one that does exist in the model, is giving us the calculated square footage based on its boundaries. Okay, so in this case, it's 455 square feet. Room 100, on the other hand, can't calculate the area because it is not placed. So it is simply saying not placed. Now, the area column is really useful for helping you identify rooms that are not placed, rooms that are redundant. So anything that would prevent Revit from calculating a valid area for the room element, it's going to display that information in the area column instead. The same is true for the volume column. So if we went back to our fields here and we added in the volume, you're going to see similar information. It's going to say not placed here instead of actually some number of cubic feet. Okay? Now, if you want to delete a room permanently, then you can do so from the schedule. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the corridor 101, and I'm going to click over here on the Modify Schedule and Quantities tab, and there's a Delete Rows button right here. If you click that, it says this will delete one selected room and any associated room tags. This is unlike the message we saw in the floor plan, and when I click OK, it removes the line item from the schedule and it removes the corresponding element from the floor plan. So notice if I go over here in the floor plan, there is no longer a room in that location. So that is a permanent deletion. So if you ever want to delete a room for real permanently and not keep it kind of in holding in your schedule, then the way to delete it is from a schedule. It doesn't matter what schedule, you can delete it from any schedule. And in fact, if I reopen the room finish schedule, you can see that it's deleted here as well. So it didn't matter which schedule I did that from, any schedule will do. So that's how you actually delete a room. If you delete it from the model, that's not enough. You've got to actually delete it from the schedule. But now that message also said that we could place it back in the model later using the room tool. So right now we've got a room 100 lobby, that is not placed. And I might change my mind and say, I'd like to place that back in the model. How do I do that? Well, go to a floor plan. You can't do it from a schedule, but go to a floor plan. And then we're going to click the room tool. And what I want to direct your attention to is this drop down right here. So the default behavior for the room tool is to create a new room, okay? And if you did that, you will see a new entry appear on the schedule, room 102 in this case, and then it's got the calculated area and volume. But if instead I click over here and change the drop down, instead of creating a new room, I switch to 100 lobby. Now I am placing that existing room from the schedule, and notice it now gives me the area and volume of that room. So that previously unplaced room is now placed back in the model, okay? Now you may be wondering why Revit behaves this way. Why would it do that? Okay, it seems like a kind of an obscure set of behaviors there that you need to be aware of. And admittedly, that's true. And if you think about it from a certain point of view, that makes sense. Like, why don't they just make this simpler? But there's a workflow that is kind of assumed in that behavior that is not necessarily obvious. And I'd like to end this video by going through that workflow with you. So the idea is sometimes you will start a project with a list of spaces that are required by this project. So you might want a certain number of classrooms and a certain number of lab spaces, a certain number of offices. And so you'll start with that program of spaces, and then as the project progresses, you'll want to maybe start placing those spaces in the model. So this mechanism that I've just walked you through here in Revit with its behavior with rooms facilitates that kind of a workflow. So let me demonstrate what I mean by that. The only thing I haven't shown you yet in the schedule is that in addition to deleting a data row, which we saw permanently remove the corridor room, right above that is insert data row. And when you do that, you're creating a new room. So if I click Insert Data Row, it's going to create room number 103 with the name room, and notice that it is not placed. So this is very similar now to the room that we had a moment ago when we had deleted the lobby from the model. So I could create as many of these as were necessary. And then you could even go in here and begin deciding what kind of rooms these are. And once you've done that, you could then eventually come around and place them in the model. So let's say that we had these different types of rooms that we wanted to add to our project. Then once we've done that, we could come back into the floor plan and go to the room tool, and all of those will appear right here. Now, in order to make this kind of more complete, what a lot of firms will do is they will add a custom property to the room category. So I'm going to do that here in the working room schedule. So what I'm going to do is scroll down here to the Edit Fields button and click it. And then right here in the middle of the dialog is a new parameter icon. Click that, and what you're creating is a new project parameter. You can see that up here at the top. And I'm going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this required area. And the data type for this is going to be area. So I want that to be, in my case, I'm in imperial units. I want that to be in square footage. Now, it's putting it under analysis results, and I think I'd rather that go under data, but you can always move it around later. So once I've done that and I click OK, this required area field will now appear as a column in the schedule. But unlike this area that that's only read only, you can't actually edit this, right? If I try and type in anything, this one is editable. And so I could say that not only do I want a toilet room, but the required area is at least 150 square feet. And not only do I want an office, the required area for that is at least 165 square feet. Okay. And maybe this support space is 100. And so now what I could do is I could select some of these, and I'm just going to kind of insert a few more here. And I'm going to make each of these offices, and then I'll just grab this, Control-C, and I'll paste it in to all of these locations. So now we've got a number of offices that we need to have, right? So I've created several, and then what their requirements are. And none of them are placed just yet. But now when the time comes and the plan starts to take shape, when we're ready, we can start placing those rooms. And so I come over here to the room command, and I'm going to start placing my offices. And so I'll put in Office 106 right there and 107 right there, and then just keep working my way down the list here. And when I'm done, I now have the ability to compare the actual area with the required area. And you can see the different values and how they stack up to the requirements. So in all these cases, it looks like all of my offices are close, but they're just a little bit small. But that now allows us to go back and have a discussion with the client and decide whether or not these values are acceptable or not. Maybe as long as we're within 10% or something, it's acceptable, or perhaps not, and we have to do a redesign. But you'll find that that's often how folks will use this tool, is they will use it to create this program of spaces ahead of time in a schedule. And then once they've got that program of spaces, they can use that with the room tool to place those predefined rooms and place them into the model in the locations where you need them to go. Now here I focused on just name, number, and required area, but keep in mind that you can add any fields you like. So we could have included department and occupancy information and finish information and pre-populated our program with all of that information as well. So it's up to you which fields you want to pre-populate and how you want to treat that. But by kind of building this list of unplaced rooms to start with, then you have that database of room data and program data that you can then populate your model with when the time is right.